See some of those books? See what I'm trying to do here? Trying to show you some books. I've got like 6 bookshelves in here. All right. Good morning, good evening, good to who needs it. Hi. 2023 is coming to a close. Oh, wow. Yeah. 2023 is coming to a close. Deciding to do something. Yeah. Hi. How many times can I start this? Kind of miss having my eyebrow notched. It's going well, as all things in my life always are. 2023 is coming to a close, and I'm deciding to do something with that random list of my favorite books that I've read this year, that I've made for the last 2 years, but just kind of sits as a tag on the blog. So I'm going to be talking about the books that you find under 2023 when you look at it on the blog. This is all just a reference to the blog. Maybe read the blog. Maybe do that. You don't have to, I don't care. I care a lot. There's a thing, if you go onto my blog, there's a tag under which it says favorite books of the year, and it goes down and it'll give you, for this year, there were 7 books that I put up and tagged under this. And I'm going to talk about them right now and why I think you should read them. Like I said, I don't normally do anything with this, but 2023 is all about accountability. This is bad on purpose, by the way. Like, you're not getting my good efforts here. Like, I reserve that for, like, actual work. This is me fucking around. And you're finding out. Congratulations. 2023. Accountability for normal people. Ooh, I didn't notice how red my hair looks in here. Nice. Hello. So, I am actually only going to talk about 6 of my 7 books. These aren't in any ranked order because I like them each for different reasons, but I wanted to reflect on what stood out about each book to me the most. The book I'm not going to go into too deeply is Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This was technically a reread, so it's not really fair to say it's one of my favorite books that I read this year, but it's a very wonderful story, and it means a lot to me, and I would definitely recommend you check it out if you haven't. And for most memorable scene for you, I'm going to just tease you with pulling the worm out of his foot. But onto my other 6 favorite books of the year. This may contain spoilers. The first I'm going to talk about is The 6 Deaths of the Saint, which is actually a novella, and it's one of the novellas available for free on Kindle if you have Prime, which I recommended this year. It was one of my favorite shorter stories available, and one which I kept access to even after borrowing it. The story weaves a very beautiful narrative, which involves the main character, a woman who is visited by a saint, as she calls them, who tells her of her inner power and ability, and this woman is then used as a weapon by a warring king. Each time she dies in battle, she is visited by the saint over again, starting anew, but each time the saint is more haggard and vile than before, until the woman ultimately is able to recall that she is the saint, forced into a time loop by the king to be used as a weapon because of her foretold power. Ultimately, this story is about how the cycle is broken through sacrifice and learning to love oneself by allowing yourself to be loved. I adored this story. It checked off so many positives for me that I had to include it in this list, despite it only being 29 pages. The second book, one of the ones I read earliest this year, is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This is another story with a lost in time element. I adore fantasy stories with deals with the devil and with funky timeline hijinks, and this fits both. The story is ultimately about the importance of being seen and recognized for who you are, as well as fighting against controlling codependent relationships. In the end, Addie makes a sacrifice, which seems counterintuitive to that theme. However, I'd argue that in taking control of her situation and making the sacrifice, she is extending the story beyond what we read to how to operate now on her own terms and not the terms of her contract with the darkness. I adored the devil character and his likable, hateable portrayal. It was a very good representation of being trapped in a cycle of narcissistic abuse. The terms of Addie's contract are immortality in exchange for recognition. Addie lives a life in which no one can recognize her until inexplicably one day someone can. The story moves back and forth between time points in Addie's past and her present. This was one of the first books I read this year, which I got really engrossed in and enjoyed. I'd also like to just add Addie isn't necessarily a very likable character at all times, and that's great. That needs to happen more. She has such a realness about her because she is so very flawed. The next book on our list is Honeycomb by Joanna M. Harris. This involves another very flawed character. I had been feeling a lack in my life after finishing all of the Susanna Clark. Honeycomb has made me a huge fan of Harris's Fae stories and really scratched that itch for me of what had been missing. I also read it while I was going through a really very difficult period, and it was the first book I was able to finish and devour it and really get engrossed in again, which is a really important element for me of how encompassing a book can be. It's important to note, and I believe I said this on the blog, I'm afraid of bugs. Like, horrified by the existence of many bugs so severely that I don't know if existence is worth it if we have to coexist. But the different affectations and tribes of insect-based fae were really delightful to me, and I ended up really having a soft spot for the fact that ladybirds were the villains and bees had this ethereal godlike quality. It's a really, really amazing book, and the interweaving stories, the story of the porcelain girl, each chapter is kind of set to its own drum, and the way that they ultimately do intersect and interweave and you get to revisit characters is really, really refreshing and really, really so well thought out and so intelligent and just delightful. Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I'm going to admit it to you. I read this book because headhunters and literary agents I was talking to kept mentioning it. I had so many people say to me, well, do you have something like Mexican Gothic? And I had to know. And now that I do know, I couldn't agree more. I've since read all of the Sylvia Moreno Garcia that I can get my hands on. I feel like I probably couldn't vibe more with something, and I definitely understand why I was getting a lot of comparison questions. Mexican Gothic is evocative of Guillermo del Toro, of classic Gothic literature like Mary Shelley, with its own flair and modern voice and tone, which centers both Mexican culture, colonialist attitudes, racism, and just has delightful, evil, self-centered villains that are so engrossed in their own brand of eugenics that they don't see what the big problem is. I adored it. Next up, we have Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott, which, I will be honest, I'm having a hard time thinking of how I will summarize this poignant, intelligent examination of generational trauma in the guise of a fantasy book. I'm almost afraid to say anything because I want you to read it so badly. Bellatine and Isaac Yaga are the inheritors of Thistlefoot and the generational trauma that Thistlefoot represents. This trauma both makes them who they are and is what has kept them from their happiness and success, as they don't understand where this pain and shame comes from. The theme of the family is largely running from your problems and for your life. The genocide at the heart of the story is depicted so devastating and heart-wrenchingly well in the flashbacks had by Thistlefoot, and the movement toward healing is so well plotted. Lastly, I want to talk to you about dear Dr. Tingle, who this year published his first horror novel, Camp Damascus. This book doesn't hold back. The horror is not subtle and starts on page 1, in beautiful contrast to the real horror at the heart of the novel, conversion therapy. The characters are continually gaslit from acknowledging their horrifying experiences, only to find that their memories have been erased by the church and their family's effort to cleanse them of undesirable behavior. There is no wait till the end bullshit. Dr. Tingle lets you know up front, these people are being harmed by their families in the church, and the homophobia and religious trauma that gets explored is the real evil. I also never knew how badly I was lacking neurodiverse representation. The main character refers to herself as clearly somewhere on the spectrum, and this coincides with the family gaslighting her to think and behave otherwise. The narrative voice represents this perfectly. I could not recommend this book enough, and I would always encourage you to follow the good Dr. Tingle's work. I'm very excited for the next horror novel, which is set to come out, I believe, in 2024. Hope. Did you enjoy? I did good. I did good job. I also made a list of things I think need to stay in 2023. I will now subject you to that. Teenagers doing TikTok dances in public. People who don't know anything scientific beyond like a bio 101 situation giving medical advice. Giving advice. Scary clowns. This one has a long thought to it. I can't make a whole video on this concept, but I do want to talk about it. So if you read enough of the same author, especially like in a row, like if you're doing an essay on someone like I did on Jane Austen earlier this year, and it's on the blog, read it. You start to notice through lines that make you think things about their lives that may or may not be true. It's all conjecture, but you do notice the through line is there. And one, this terrifies me as someone who writes because I know what's wrong. I know what's wrong with me. I know. It's the people who aren't self-aware that, yeah, I know. But like, there's like, there comes a time where you're just like, there's a lot of cat girls, or you're like, oh, you mentioned piss a lot. It just, let's not do that anymore. It's never the people that you want to be self-aware who are self-aware. Dracula's. Elon Musk. Always outside my window, stealing pies. Any single time someone shows me a thing and it says X, I'm like launched into realms of dislike. I can't even look at it. Don't need to dunk on crypto anymore. It's thoroughly dunked. We got it. We're there. Adults using their kids on social media for clout. The demon I made a deal with to save that guy, and then the guy ended up sucking, and now I'm stuck with the demon. Whatever it is you find most likable about me, go fuck yourself. I don't care. This isn't a comment box. Hey, I kept it kind of apolitical. Unless you're a cunt. Happy New Year. For more information on this topic, sources, and other content, please look at the associated blog post on aliactus.com. That's ALIACTAST.com. The blog updates with weekly book reviews and essays on Saturdays. If you liked this, like it and share whatever you feel you gotta do. There are monthly video essays the last week of every month and a plethora of random shit in between. Thank you so much for listening.